Before becoming Minister of Science and Higher Education, I was a serial entrepreneur, as was said in the introduction. I built 3 companies myself, failed at the first one, as you should do, and then I've invested in more than 20 companies, of which many of them also has failed. But they also, all of them started, I invested because I saw some entrepreneurs that had the hunger. That's the most important dimension, that they have the hunger to change something, the hunger to go for success. But also at the same time, and that's the paradigm here, and where it becomes a bit difficult, at the same time, they need to be willing to face failure and accept that as quite a high risk if you go out and start something new. That's not only when you start a new company, also when you start a new initiative inside other companies. I sometimes say that, I'm happy that I had to become an entrepreneur first time in 2005 after law and 4 years at McKinsey. Because back in 2005, can you still hear me? Back in 2005, the whole level of entrepreneurship was not as high as it is today. If I'd come out today in the world that your students will come out into, I would not succeed. I would not have a chance. Because what they are willing to face in terms of rapid change, what they are willing to, or what they are prepared to face in terms of not only a connected world that I saw back then, but a hyper-connected world, what they are able to face in terms of rapid changes, where it becomes even cheaper and even easier to start a company. Back when I started my first technology company, we had to spend probably $500,000 on servers. Today, you put your credit card, swipe that on Amazon Web Services, and you're up and running for $20. That means that the competitive situation for new entrepreneurs today is much higher, but at the same time, opportunities are also much wider and much higher. Technologies like artificial intelligence and big data offers huge opportunities for the student that you put out into the work life. Therefore, you need to make sure that they're not afraid of technology. They don't have to be developers. We don't want them to be engineers. They need to be business people put into the world, but they need to understand technology. They need to know enough in order to see the opportunities so they can make the business innovation on top of the technical innovations. But technology is not neutral. It carries values, it carries moral, it carries ethics. So when you create an algorithm at Facebook, some developers, they sit and make decisions on algorithms. The same with self-driving cars. And we need to be aware of that as societies, but also the business students coming out there, so they can ask the right questions around ethics, around values, around morals. And hopefully that gives them more ability and more trust in adapting new technologies. So I believe that the huge opportunity in the future is to combine various disciplines at universities. CBS is a good example of that, where you have an eye for more than just business. CBS offers programs in business administration combined with philosophy, sociology, and psychology. Because at CBS, you know that young professionals must have a broader perspective, and they need an ethical understanding of the field of work. But the most important thing for me is that we need to encourage the students to be able and willing to follow their dreams. To have confidence in their dreams so they can go out and build new companies, break through innovation in existing companies, and create growth in our societies. And that calls for a more experimental approach in our educational systems. An approach where the students are not afraid to fail, an approach the student can free themselves from the expectations of high grades and what they think the educators, the teachers would like to hear. Albert Einstein, as you might know, failed 4 subjects in his last course at school. The teachers did not believe in him. Still, the man was able to fundamentally change the way we see the world. So whenever you see this entrepreneurial spirit in your students, of course do not stop it. Nurture it, encourage it. Don't kick them out of school. We need them to be well educated, but still encourage them to follow their dream. That's important for society, and that's important for growth in our countries. Trying and failing is an excellent way to learn. As I alluded to before, I failed in my first company, and I learned a lot from that. And I used those learnings, those experiences, to build my next 2 companies. We need students that are prepared to experiment within their fields. And sometimes they will fail, and sometimes they will succeed, but they will always learn and become better. We cannot predict the future. The best way to try to predict the future is to be part of creating it. And you can help your students doing that. Teach them to be curious, teach them to be willing to experiment, and teach them to take responsibility. And then also give them a strong understanding of technology, because it's no longer just at the edge of society, it's at the core, it's at the center of everything we're doing. So dear leaders, dear educators, go out there and dream big on behalf of your students and on behalf of your institutions. I hope you had a good conference here at CBS. Thank you.
Administrators, we had one key conversation that we had was triggered by the question, what is it that you want your grandchildren to learn? And this was something that we were debating on Twitter during this conference. Some of the results that you see behind you. And I'm combining that to 2 questions. Well, first is, what do you want your grandchildren to learn? Because that will inform some of the curriculum thinking that this industry needs to do. And maybe you also want to take the opportunity to respond to some of the responses that were crowdsourced and that you see behind you.
So first, I would rather like to think about what I want my kids to learn. Because if I think of my grandchildren, then we accept that this will take a long time to change. I think we need to change a bit faster. So my kids are 10 and 7. And I think the one person that inspired me the most in order to how to think about what I want them to actually to become, what do I want them to study, just take that. Then, it's the old question about what do you want to be when you grow up, right? We used to ask that to other people. We were asked that when we were younger, sorry. And Thomas Friedman from New York Times have said that it's not about what you want to be when you grow up, it's how you want to be it. Because we cannot predict, what we want to be, what job we want to have, because many of the jobs that will exist when my kids graduate from, of course, CBS, in 10, 15, 18 years from now, many of these jobs do not exist today. And that's why I like this, because this has a lot to do with how you want to be it, right? What is it, the critical thinking, the empathy, the ethics, all of these are super important subjects for us to address, rather than always think about this specific job. That's also why we'd love to see a bit more flexibility in our educational systems here in Denmark, that we broaden it out a bit more, and we don't focus that much on, I have this exact education, this exact combination, and therefore it needs to match this exact job. Right? I studied law at my bachelor, I studied law at my master's, and I was expected to have a 40-year career in law. That's a bit how we look at education, right? Law, lawyer. Super simple. But the world is not that simple, so we need to accept that it's much more fluid, and therefore we need to, I think, broaden the perspective a bit in our schools that also include stuff like this, because that addresses how you want to be it, not what you want to be when you grow up. It didn't answer your question, but it got my point across. That's how it is to be a politician.
Not from Denmark. Could you tell us a little bit about specific Danish educational system, if any specificity in the Danish model? In some surveys, Danes are considered among the most happy people, the happiest people in the world. Sometimes you compete with other Scandinavians or with Canadians. So any specificity about the Danish model, in addition to the fact that when you visit the Queen, you don't wear a tie.
I have, as I said, the world is fluid, and so is my dressing. so I was wearing a tie until 5 minutes before arriving here. Of course. Guess what? And that's probably what shocked me the most coming into this role, is that they're not that happy. When you ask the young people, they are stressed. They answer, if you quite scientific approach, going out and ask young people, many of them, no matter whether they're part of our higher educational system or whether they're not, answer that they feel stressed. They don't feel happy. They feel that, bad translation here, but life hurts. That's 1/3 of our young people. That's how they answer when we go out and look into their health, their mental health, their well-being. And that's a big problem. I don't know if it has anything to do with what we do in our educational system. I think it's part of it, and I'm prepared to look at that. But I think there's a lot about the fear of failure, that everything has to be perfect, has to look perfect, go to the right parties, get the highest grades, and that's the only thing that counts. Get the best job at the best institution, right? There's so much pressure, and I think we need, as educators and institutions, we need to address that. Because we are close to young people from they are 18, 20 years old until they're 23, 25 years old, right? So that was just about whether it just tricked me in terms of are we that happy? I think we have some issues there that we need to look into. I'm not sure I can find a political solution on all of these, but I think we need to talk about it. Specificity around when I look at how many people go straight from bachelor to master's degree, then it's 85% here in Denmark. 85%. Few countries have a higher percentage than that. Many of the Nordic countries are down in the, as far as I remember, around 70. Other countries, UK and US, are even lower. You might know this better than me, but we are high there, and that's. I think we are. Our thinking around education is too stringent. We think about education as something you do, when you're young, between 18 and 23, or 20 and 25, and then you're done. And we need to start talking about that differently here in Denmark, and maybe also in your countries, that to start to address this vision around lifelong learning. And to me, it would start with having more bachelors going out, having a job for 2 years, 3 years, and then we guarantee them that they can come back here at CBS or other students, DTU, the Technical University here, and then take their master. We have a bit of a lock-up situation now. When you're good, a strong student here at CBS, you know that you cannot leave CBS as a bachelor because you cannot get the job you want. And the business out there know they don't want to hire any bachelor because they know the good students are not leaving as bachelor. They wait until they are masters. So we need to have that conversation with businesses at the same time, so they start offering the interesting jobs that will drag the bachelors out after the 3 years, right? So it's not only, changing the law will not fix all of it, right? It can fix some of it.
Thank you very
Okay,
much for your time.
thanks.